and then we can fill for a minute. Or not. That works.
Well, this is the yeah, yeah.
Like the years of training thing, I don't think works anymore because it's been now years of doing it live.
I mean, that doesn't mean we're actually going to be inclined to do anything different.
Yeah.
Despite me fussing at you.
Think about it. Formative years, though. Formative.
That is true, yeah. I have I have a bad habit of still thinking about like dinosaurs the way they were when I was a kid, and then I have to keep reminding myself, no, that's not how that works anymore. Actually,
So lately, I've been showing Sam some movies, some of which she appreciates, some of which she doesn't. But some movies that I grew up with, like Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Carrie kept saying, like, "Are we gonna watch Men in Tights?" And I'm like, I don't know that. I mean, some of that stuff is actually a little more out there. Um, but Carrie really likes Men in Tights. Uh, I showed her. It's newer, but Batman Begins. And lately, we went through the Back to the Future trilogy,
Hmm.
and that
nice.
that sticks pretty close. Like the furthest in time it goes back is 1885, but they had a little special on the disc. Did anybody ever go to Universal Studios when they still had the Back to the Future ride?
Yes.
Yeah, Dark did. Anybody else?
I've
I never
still never
rode
been
it,
there.
but
Oh,
the
you
only
never
ride
rode it?
at Universal I rode when I went there was King Kong and Jaws.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
I got in there early enough to get on um, King Kong, and then we waited so long on the ride because it broke down at one point right off the bat that it took me 3 hours to get onto Jaws, and the line to get on Back to the Future was 3 more hours long, and I was like, nope, not doing it.
Wow.
So, so where I'm going with this is, um, I remembered this ride, the Back to the Future ride, from when I was a kid. And lo and behold, on the DVD of Back to the Future Part 3, under special features, they had the Back to the Future ride stuff. They had a long segment that was just like, how when you're waiting in line, there's TV screens in a lot of rides, and it kind of shows things going on to kind of set the mood and things like that. And so here it had like scenes playing out from Doc Brown's laboratory, where in the universe of the ride, he's continued his time experiments and all that. And that was pretty long. But then it also had the video from the ride itself, because the ride itself is like Star Tours, where you're in this kind of enclosed space and you have the giant screen in front of you, and the area around you like dips and curves and goes up, so you have a sense of movement, right? So it actually let us watch the ride. I'm like, this is great. And I remembered at the end, I really could have sworn from being a kid, I'm like, because you're chasing Biff back through time, that you actually go back to like the period of the dinosaurs. And we're watching this, and this was like 2 or 3 days ago. And it comes on, and it's like, watch out for a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And a Tyrannosaurus Rex shows up. And this is like 1993 graphics Tyrannosaurus Rex. And I'm like, wow. I mean, it still holds a special place in my heart, but I'm like, wow. Far be it for me to take me out of the immersion of watching this ride, sitting on my couch in my living room, but still, wow. So you mentioned like dinosaurs, how we pictured them versus how we kind of picture them now, and I was immediately like, yeah, I was just there, buddy, just there. I like how, at least in Jurassic Park, like when they made the Jurassic World movies, the scientist said he purposely played with the DNA to make them look a way that more people would gravitate toward. He's like, I was making designer dinosaurs. You wanted me to make them look this way, even if they're not scientifically accurate. So nice little thing there.
Okay, then. That's what I get for complaining that when I say Phil, everyone gets quiet. Now Brian decides to tell a 5-minute story.
You asked, you said to fill. I filled, and then some. My cup overfloweth with
All right,
dinosaurs.
shut up. Here we go. Ow, jam. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mana Pool. This is episode 659 of the Mana Pool, and we're back. We took a couple weeks off, partially because Mike was, halfway across an ocean, and also partially because we didn't want to. But now we're back, but we're taking a week off from Magic to talk about something much bigger and broader than, I don't know, silver bordered nonsense that is currently going on.
Isn't it like black border this time or something?
Yeah,
weird?
now they
I don't
have
know.
acorn
Yeah.
stamps if it's supposed to be silver bordered. Anyway.
Right. Anyway.
A week or so ago on Twitter, I do a thing on Twitter and in the Discord occasionally where I call it Chewy Asks, where I'll just ask a question and get your responses. And because I always want to know things. And the one that I asked recently was, what's your favorite video game genre? Because, spoilers, the concept of video game genres has fascinated me forever. Because genres, by and large, don't mean much anymore because everything is a mishmash of like 18 different genres and subgenres and sub-subgenres. And so how we classify things now, I find it fascinating. But when I said, hey, you guys want to talk about something that isn't Magic, Brian, of all people, was like, hey, you asked on Twitter about video game genres. What if we do that? And I was like, oh, that's good.
I have decent ideas every now and then.
It's true.
Not to mention I just was cribbing your idea. So, haha.
Yeah, it turns out I have good ideas every once in a while, and then Brian applies them. So, I figured we would spend this episode talking about video game genres that we like and dislike, and talk about, some of the games in each one. And more importantly, why we do or don't like them, because that's always the thing that I'm interested in, is the why of things. It's, why I went into physics is because why?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's what we're doing this week. And I figured to start off, we would start with, it's not the granddaddy of all genres, because it turns out that what's widely recognized as the first video game was a sports game.
Really? I would have thought it would have been Pong.
Yeah, which is a very stylized tennis.
Oh.
Yeah.
Neat.
Oh, okay. I was wondering if you were going to reveal there was something else that came before that space game.
Madden
that
Madden
the researchers
65,
Yeah, Madden 1965, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I said what's widely regarded as the first video game. I'm sure there's someone out there who's like, actually, the first video game... Shut up.
I was about to do that.
No. Nah, I didn't know. But, yeah, like Pong is an extreme stylization of tennis, It was the NBA Jam of its time. It took what tennis is and simplified it down until it was fun.
Did you ever see did you ever see before we move on from Pong, that 70s show?
Fortunately, no.
There was an episode where one of the characters, who's a teenager, they've played Pong, and he's basically played Pong to death, and he's trying to basically take the game system apart to try to make it harder. and the dad finds him. And originally, the dad is kind of a hard ass. It's like that's his whole character development. He's a hard ass. And originally, you're like, oh shoot, he's gonna beat beat the crap out of him or something. He's like, no, I share your frustration. Let's crack this baby like an egg. They were trying to basically speed up the game. They were trying to hack the game, to make it harder. So I thought that
That's
was
freaking funny.
humorous. Yeah. Anyway, but we're not talking about sports, at least not yet. We're starting with.
Yeah. Uh, but the platform that, at least when I was a kid, the genre that when I was a kid was the most prolific and one of my favorites, and that's the platformer.
Yep.
Like it all started with, let's see, I'm not gonna say it started with, but one of the earliest like breakout superstar games was Donkey Kong, at least in the platforming genre, was Donkey
Yep.
Kong. And from there we got Mario Brothers, and then we got the granddaddy of them all, the Super Mario Brothers,
Mm.
which I learned recently was actually like the pinnacle of what the NES could do by itself. Was Super Mario Brothers. Like the first one.
That doesn't surprise me, honestly. You think
Yeah.
about everything that goes
You
into
mean
that.
you mean the hardware in the console itself
Yeah, yeah.
and not in the cartridges?
Yeah, the reason that the NES was able to keep getting better and better and better after Super Mario Brothers was because of chips in the cartridges themselves that could
Oh.
expand its capabilities.
I knew that, but I didn't know it started that early.
Yeah, the Super Nintendo, or the Super Nintendo, the original Nintendo Entertainment System, it turns out, was not super powerful by itself, and the Super Mario Brothers was pretty much, at least according to a video series I've been watching on the channel. What's his name? Jeremy Parrish. It's called Video Works. But yeah, according to him and his research, the NES hit its peak by itself without additional chips in cartridges with Super Mario Brothers. And I was like, that's amazing. So yeah. But so the platformer is a character. Well, the 2D platformer is a character moving either left or right or up or down, and jumping
Moving to the
on
right.
platforms. And hey, Scuzzo with the 54-month resub. That is not a small number. Thanks, buddy.
It's a lot of months.
It is.
Like Mega Man.
Like Mega Man. And the Mario games. And there were so many on the NES especially.
Mm-hmm.
And
Because
that,
it's something that people could grasp is, oh, I go from this side to this side, and there in I depends on the game, but you usually some way of maneuvering around, like, okay, you're going horizontally but also vertical movement through jumping or flying or whatever. I never played Kid Icarus, but I imagine the original Kid Icarus probably would have been a platformer.
yeah. It was it was mostly, well, the first few levels at least were mostly vertical platforming too, which is weird.
Hmm.
Wonder if Kung Fu would have been considered a platformer. Did you ever play Kung Fu?
Yeah, that's one of the few NES games I still have. Actually, I can see it from here.
I played that at my cousin's. I never owned it, but basically you go through each level. I think it's actually revolutionary in that you go right to left, but as you go, you
Well, it
punch the guys
alternates
in
with each
front of
level.
you. Does it? Okay, I didn't get terribly far. Also, I played it. Oh, I'm being serious when I say 30 years ago, aren't I? Yep.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
But I don't
But
think that's a platformer because you don't actually do any platforming. That's more of
Any jumping?
that's more of a beat 'em up.
more of a beat. Okay,
Yeah.
so it would have been one of the first beat 'em ups. It would have been Double
Oh, yeah.
Dragon before there was Double Dragon. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So then I was thinking more of the travel across the screen, but okay. But yeah, I mean the platformer is, first of all, it's such a broad category, even when we're talking about genres, because you can have ones that maybe focus a little more on combat. Maybe they have weapons, maybe they don't. Maybe, the closest you get to combat is Mario jumping on a Goomba, which especially for the environment of the 80s and early 90s when you had, parental groups condemning violence on cartoons and things like that, gives developers some options. Oh, this is a family friendly game, something like that. Castlevania would be a platformer, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
because you're jumping from ledge to ledge, or to avoid enemies, you're going upstairs, sometimes very slowly.
Most of the time,
Sometimes
very slowly in those damn games.
Simon died on the stairs. What a
What
surprise!
a
Or he got,
surprise!
or he got hit going down the stairs and fell through the stairs and all the way to the bottom into the pit.
uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, so you've got your
But
your slow and deliberate platformers like the early Castlevania games. You've got your more like Mario really set a precedent for the amount of control you had on your for your character, because Mario
Yeah.
can change directions in midair, and the control you had on his jump was just second to none.
yeah, it's true.
You've got platformers that are all about speed, like I don't know, Sonic,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just thinking 2D. Like Mario was
Yeah.
the first game to really do a true 3D uh, platformer with Mario 64.
Yeah. I remember seeing Sonic, and my brother got the Genesis, and Sonic, after a couple of years of playing NES games, bothered me on a fundamental level. You know why? Because
Go
I
ahead.
couldn't hit everything in the level like the way I had been born and raised. Like, oh, you in Mario, you hit the blocks. You look for maybe the hidden one-ups. We found some of the hidden pipes that you went through. But even though the path could divert, and maybe you found warps or whatever, generally you saw a level from beginning to middle to end. And with Sonic, because of the speed of the game and the speed that you're encouraged to go, I felt like I was missing half or more of the level. I kept wanting to backtrack, but I'm like, but the point is to go fast. And usually the rewards for backtracking were not great. You might get a couple more rings, or like a shield that doesn't travel with you to the next stage. So I don't know. I'm curious to get anybody else's thoughts on Sonic or anything in particular, but it did not gel with me because I
I
felt like, yeah,
I
because I
only
felt like I
ever
was
played the
missing out on
first one.
stage.
Well, the whole
The,
purpose of Sonic was to try and like the idea of it was I'm going to try and get through Mario as quickly as I can. So it sort of became a speed run thing. Sonic was the whomever the person who created it, he was always trying to get through the Mario game as fast as possible. So it sort of became a let me create a game that is the equivalent of I'm trying to get through Mario as quickly as possible.
hmm. Well, and I know that especially at its inception, the Genesis really, really wanted to separate itself from the Nintendo. Like that, the whole thing was, oh, Sonic is edgy.
Nintendo's thing was it was trying to be a family entertainment device, whereas Genesis was we'll make anything that will make us money.
Yeah,
Yeah. But
but yeah, that's not what we're actually talking about. But
Yes.
yes,
No, yeah.
the I only played the first Sonic, and I kind of hated it. And I've literally never played any of the Sonics, the 2D ones anyway. After that, like, because the first one is not good. Like, you get the first
not great.
world, which is the Green Hill Zone, of course, and you get a pretty good sense of speed there. They they still had this problem of putting sudden enemies and sudden spikes and things in front of you that you couldn't know were there unless you've played a dozen times.
Hmm.
Uh-huh.
But then the second level was
The
the
Marble Zone,
yeah,
right?
marble
Or
something, I
yeah.
forget what, but there was no speed there because there was lots of waiting on things that were floating on lava and waiting for traps to
Oh
get out of the
yeah.
way and this and that and the other.
The
And by the time I got through that area, I was sick of this game.
Well, then I think the next area was like the ruins area where you're underwater most of the time. So if you were still playing then, hmm.
Yeah.
Second one was better. Second was with Tails and the casino zone and all that.
Yeah,
So
apparently they got way better after that, but I was a diehard Nintendo fanboy back then, so I only bought Genesis games when they really like spoke to me, and most of them didn't.
But I mean, while I'm not trying to turn this into Nintendo versus Sega. I mean, this just goes to show you there's a lot of depth to platformer games where you can have Mario on one hand and Sonic on another, and they play nothing alike. Like, and to the point, like I said, that they play so fundamentally different that I felt like I was doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, did anybody ever play Burger Time on the Atari?
On the
We're trying to
Atari?
assemble the.
I know I played it on like crummy flash emulators.
Yeah, and I've played. Oh yeah, I've played it on Crummy Flash emulators too, and I played the Nintendo version once. Somebody had it, some friend of mine, but it was an arcade game that I never really got into.
I played it. There was a lake house that we went to when I was a kid, and they had an Atari, and I thought this thing was fascinating because this was after the Nintendo Entertainment System was out, and I was never one for like outdoors and stuff. I would go out, I would do family stuff, but I'd be like, let me check out these video games, and some of them were fun, kind of, sort of. I mean, it was the early ages, so. But I remember trying Burger Time.
Yeah, not a platformer, but very good stuff.
No, I didn't.
Yeah,
I didn't
technically,
know if it qualified.
it's a Pac-Man type of game, a maze chase. Like I know it's set
That's
up
true.
to be platforms, but it's essentially a maze chase game.
Well, there you go. So,
But ow, like just recent platformers I've played. Like I played the Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, which is the 8-bit looking version of Bloodstained,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really good. It's what you wish Castlevania 3 was.
mhm.
Like what Castlevania 3 was in your memory is what Curse of the Moon actually is. uh and The Messenger, oh my god. The Messenger is one of my favoriteest games of all time, and it starts off as a regular ass platformer.
I don't think I've ever played The Messenger.
Oh, it's so good. But it starts off, like I said, as a platformer that looks NES style. You know, you're a ninja. And then at some point, once you think you're done with the game, you think you're about halfway through the game, and you go through a portal, and everything upgrades to 16-bit, which this is one of the selling points. So this isn't a spoiler, although by the time I was ready to play it, I had forgotten this. But but
Well,
it becomes a 16-bit, and I mean everything upgrades, even the music. Like Rainbow Dragon Eyes did 2 soundtracks, one in 8-bit and one in 16-bit, and it's amazing. And it becomes
I
a
mean,
Metroidvania style game at that point.
sometimes even if in game something is supposed to be a bit of a spoiler, by the time the game comes out, it's like I remember the ads for Zelda: A Link to the Past. The ads were like, "There's a second world when you beat the first world." I'm like, thanks. I guess we're not, I guess we're dispensing with suspense entirely, but okay. So, spoiler alert for like a million-year-old game, but you know, there's a dark world.
But
Um,
so back to platformer. So
yeah,
what do we like about or dislike or whatever about platformers?
I like, and I've alluded to this a bit, how versatile the genre is. Even considering that these genres can bleed together, I like the fact that platformers can be so varied. Would you consider Contra to be a platformer?
I was just about to bring up Contra. Contra is a
Yeah.
weird mix of like a run and gun game,
Hmm.
like what was the name of that stupid game? Russian Attack, and stuff like that. But it has a lot more platforming in it. This is what I mean when I say that video game genres don't actually mean anything anymore. Uh,
Mhm.
Right.
because Contra was a run and gun game first off, but it was also a platformer
Yeah.
at the same time, which
And
I think was fairly novel at the time because I think back then you either got one or the other.
and then ActRaiser and ActRaiser 2, especially ActRaiser 2. ActRaiser 1 was half platformer
Yep.
and half world
Like a
building simulation kind of
yeah.
sort of thing. It was
Mm.
early in that you didn't have like complete control. The game was still like you really want to build a road here or you can't advance. It was not like super freedom, but it was fascinating. I loved ActRaiser. I rented it I don't even know how many times. And honestly, I was a little disappointed with ActRaiser too that instead of the world building part, they just cut that out and every area was two platformer areas. But the character also had a lot more versatility and had a much bigger move set. So
Yeah, and apparently
ActRaiser
that game was
counts, right?
balls hard.
It was very difficult.
I never
I can
played the
probably
second
count
one.
on one hand the number of times that I beat it without a code. And my hand is staying down. So yeah, it's tough. It's tough. I was a little surprised again, but I definitely so versatile. I like that platformers can be very versatile. That does also mean that the flip side to that is as well because it can be so many things. There are subsets of the genre that I just won't play because they're just not for me.
Yeah. But one of the things I always liked about platformers was that you could put anybody in a platformer game as long as you did it right.
Yeah.
Like, did anyone ever play the original Batman game on the NES by Sunsoft?
Yes.
I
Yes.
think I played it at someone's house. Yeah.
Oh
Like
man, I'm
that,
hearing the soundtrack in my head.
right? Like that game was
Yes.
so damn good. But it was
Another hard one. Another
another
hard one
hard one,
though.
yeah. But
Yeah.
it was Batman, but they made a platformer game that worked for Batman
Yeah.
because they actually, put thought and effort into it.
Yeah. Did you ever play the the RoboCop game
I
for
played
the
the first one.
NES?
I owned
Yeah,
the
my
first one,
cousin had it.
unfortunately.
Oh my god. We're talking about a hard video game. Dear Lord. Dear Lord. I don't think I ever beat the second level. I had to like go on YouTube once they created YouTube to be like, "Oh, did this have a third level?" It did. There's a part where you're like running away from the thing, and I couldn't figure out how to punch through the walls to get away um,
That game was so
fast
bad.
enough. But anyway, I
But
am all over the place in this conversation.
I mean, you say that like that's not your default state.
That's true.
Um, yeah,
But you're
the
talking about
bad
Batman.
thing I think about platformers is that if you don't like put the thought and effort into it for, Batman, then you get stuff like RoboCop. Like you just get games that aren't good or fun or some platformers have a tendency to be really samey,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
I think because
Yeah,
people
you
see
have to
them.
have it designed well so that when you get to the next level, it's actually like interesting. And if it's done really well, when you get to when you get to the next level, there's even like a wow factor. Like the platformer that I had the most familiarity with, because the Game Boy was the console I had for the longest time,
Yep.
was Super Mario Land on the Game Boy. And man, each time that I finally cleared the well, even in the very beginning, you clear a level, and the next one, some of the art is different. You're like, "Ooh, where am I?" And the setting is
Yeah.
different, and it's set up weird. And then when each time you finally clear the world that you keep dying in over and over and over again, and you get to the next world, it's like, wow, because it's so different between the art and the level setup and the enemies and everything.
I remember that game. I remember trying really. I That was a game that made me feel like I should be doing just a little better than I was. Like I was like I that
Hmm.
was a lot of these older games were difficult, but I remember that one.
Yeah, Super
Yeah,
Mario Land is a for real game. It's
it is. The older games were not forgiving. People look at new games and they're like, "Oh man, your character can do all these things, so it must be tough because the game really punishes you on that." And it can be, but in the old days when you could run and jump, if you didn't run and jump like really well with a lot of precision,
yeah, at the
you
exact
were
right time.
dead.
Yeah.
You didn't have any like healing whatever. You're just dead. You gotta
Yeah.
start the level over.
There was no
Sometimes the
double
game
jump in my
over.
day.
It's like Ninja Gaiden stuff.
Ooh, Ninja Gaiden. Ninja Gaiden is definitely a platformer and is like was Dark Souls before Dark Souls was a thing. Hell, Dark Souls is the Ninja Gaiden of right? Ninja Gaiden. Jeez.
Yeah. Like that's another thing is that you can easily artificially inflate the difficulty of an NES game or of an NES of a platformer with one simple concept that Castlevania and Ninja Gaiden had in spades: knockback.
Knockback.
Like you get hit by
Knockback.
an
Yep.
enemy and it causes you to go in a different direction against your will. Most of the time,
Yeah.
off of a platform into a pit to your death. Damn it.
Yeah. Because bottomless pits were a big thing. I mean, they still are, but geez, you need the screen to end because you only have so many pixels. Death.
Yeah. So let's talk. Dirk, you have anything to add about what you do or don't like about platformers, or did we cover it pretty well?
Um, well, a lot of things, a lot of cool stuff came out of platformers because again, you had your early versions, um, and then the one I always thought of was sort of like Mega Man as being a platformer. But the as hardware got better, you got to do more things. So my favorite was being able to dash, and even on the SNES, Mega Man got to slide at one point. Like that,
Well, I
I
think
think
he
it was
got.
like in the third or fourth one, he
I,
actually developed the ability to slide,
Yeah,
which
Mega
was
Man
a game
3
changer.
on the NES is where the slide showed up. And you're right, that
yeah.
was. Speaking of games that tend to be samey, there were 6 Mega Man games on the NES, and every one was the same damn thing. But there were just enough like changes and upgrades in
Hmm.
each one that it didn't matter if you'd already played the other 5. Mega Man was brilliant like that. I don't know who it
Yeah.
was that was in charge of those. I know that Keiji Inafune took over at some point. I don't know if he was there from the beginning or not. But like Mega Man 1 was just hard and not that good. It was okay. Mega Man 2 was a damn fine game that like refined the difficulty to make it playable for more people. Mega Man 3 added the slide, Mega Man 4 added the charge shot, and it just went from there. Like that's all that
Yeah.
I can remember off the top of my head.
Uh, 3 had the Pharaoh Man, and the whole thing about his was that you could charge it up. And so, somewhere along the line, they're like, everybody loves this. Mega Man should be able to do this. It's going to add another level, like layer of play to it. It's like how in Mega Man X, the very first item everyone gets doesn't matter. Like you always go for the boots first, and then
Yep.
you know what happened in Mega Man X2 and following. You start with the boots. Like you don't have to find them. You've already got the
Right, you have
dash
them.
because it's
Huh.
such a fundamental thing. They knew everybody just wanted this ability from the jump.
That's another
So
series I've never played is the Mega Man X games.
they're quality. I like them. At least the first 3.
Hmm.
I played 4 and 5, and that's as far as I got. But that was more about I was in college and I didn't really buy game systems in college. I was just on the computer. So but yeah, and you mentioned Metroidvanias are also fall into platformer, although they can have RPG elements.
Yeah,
But
that's where I was gonna move into next was the
okay,
Metroidvania genre because
all
I
right.
one of the games I'm currently playing is Hollow Knight, which is one of the by all acclaims it's one of the best Metroidvania style games ever. And the more that I've played it, the more I'm beginning to think that's right. Actually, like it's really good.
I cut Dirk off. Dirk, any other thoughts about
Oh yeah,
platformers
we did
or
cut Dirk off.
yeah?
Uh, well, like I said, just as hardware got better and everything, that genre it it started off as its own niche, but now it's moved into a lot of other ones where it got hybridized with other things. But that's just sort of the thing was you can't stick with that platformer ability because now all the games start to be that way. I think of the original Ninja Turtles video game when you guys were talking about Batman and Ninja Gaiden.
Yeah.
That's what that reminded me of.
Hmm.
Where I've played a little bit of the Batman game, and it was like Ninja Turtles. Because it's just you're jumping level. You're trying to get around. Oh, don't fall into the water. You're gonna die because the turtle can't swim. But
Well, no, you're
Until he
fine in the
can.
water. You're fine in the water
as long
until
as
you
it's not
touch
water you can sink into.
seaweed.
Yeah. The
Seaweed.
seaweed was the worst. So, but again, that was they have there's always a formula to how you make them, and I think that was their greatest weakness was you the only area you could grow it in was either the graphics or give the character more abilities or equipment that they could use, but you were limited by you can either go jump, go down, go left or right. Oh, now you can like shoot diagonally, but you were limited to that plane.
You know,
Once they were able to go 3D with some of the stuff, I think that did add another layer to it and moves us into probably one of our other genres that we're going to talk about at some point as well. Where you actually kind of get into the all right, now I can kind of move around the map
Well, I guess just
or
real
move around
quick,
the level in a 3D
don't
way.
want- just want to hit this just because Dark brought it up. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I will say there are some genres that adapted to 3D very easily, and then there are some that were a little rockier. Yes, platformers. You did have like Super Mario 64, like Chewie said, which was great,
there were
but you
so many
also
bad
had
3D platformers.
you had Castlevania 64 on
Ugh.
the other hand.
There were
which-
so many bad 3D platformers.
Mm.
because
Bubsy.
all of a sudden, like whereas it was hard enough to when in a 2D game to jump on platforms, and I'm using that like everybody said, oh, platformers, so platforms. You're thinking of like the floating platforms that you need to jump on. But when you're trying to do it three-dimensionally, depending on how the controls of the game were, especially the early 3D games, were miserable. When you're actually having to fight the game, like that's a problem. So,
Yeah, it always weirded me out how the first real 3D platformer was Mario 64, and it did it so well. And then so many
so well.
after that were so bad.
Well, I think it's because again, it was a Mario game, and they threw in a couple new
Excuse me.
things as well, like the wing helmet, the wing hat, and like the metal hat. But those still just basically worked off of Mario.
Yeah.
The problem is with other games like Castlevania, you also have to whip, you also have to have access to items, and you have to have currency. And because you're bogged down in all these other things, it makes it so that I feel like the complexity started to get to be too much. That on top of everything else, again, bad controls just made it horrible.
Uh-huh.
And I tried to defend it at the time and be like, it's not that bad. It's that bad. It really was.
Yeah.
So
They didn't get the controls right. They didn't get the camera right, which was
Oh,
the real
cameras.
killer. Like a lot of people
Yeah.
complain about the camera in Mario 64 from today's standards, but back then it was the best.
it was absolutely the best. I mean,
The options,
really.
yes.
So, going back
So-
to Metroidvanias,
Yes.
that's a subset, I think, of the platformer genre that doesn't have to be a platformer. Again, actual genre doesn't mean anything anymore as far as classification. It's more of a setting of expectations from the player. Like
Right. But
Batman Arkham Asylum is a Metroidvania game. Because the Metroidvania
like-
game is characterized by a large world where you can't. A lot of it is locked off until you get new abilities of some sort. So
Yeah.
you can only
I
go
mean-
to a few different places, and eventually you'll find an ability that lets you go in a different direction to a new place. Like, oh, I got the the ball so I can roll up and go to these narrow passages. Sweet. Oh, I got the high jump so I can make it up there now.
Yeah.
And it opens up
Yeah.
new areas of the world through.
Yeah.
I don't think it's gear gating. I think gear gating is a different word. Like that's for like MMOs and whatnot.
Yeah.
But
But
your abilities dictate where you can go in the
Right.
world. And like Arkham Asylum is a 3D action game that uses the Metroidvania logic to let Batman move around certain areas of the map and not others until he gets some new gadget or something, and then now he can. He's got the line launcher, so now he can make it over there. Oh, he's got the grappling thing that can rip the grates off of walls that are high up, so now he can go in those buildings. Stuff like that.
yeah, I mean, just as it says in the name, like basically so much of this started with Metroid, and it wasn't. You didn't even have a ton of beams or anything in that one, but like Chewie said, the ball that you could roll up into, the bombs, which I think you could get right away in that version. In other ones, you actually have to get the bombs separately. Um, oh, there's a platform you can't get to up there. You get the ice beam. All of a sudden, you can freeze this enemy and jump up,
Yeah.
which then encourage players down the line to be like, hey, can I go past this point in the game like earlier than the game intends me to, which is its own
Sequence
people
breaking.
doing that sort of thing. Sequence breaking, thank you, which becomes its own sort of thing. And Metroid kind of set the standard for that. And in Metroid 2, you had a couple more abilities that were like that, but it was also that so much of the open world was covered in lava. And as you defeated certain enemies, more of the lava would drain away, and then part of that was you had to find the special beams, but part of that was also just locating those enemies. And then Super Metroid was the one that really kicked this into gear.
Yeah,
With
Super Metroid and then Castlevania Symphony of the Night are what crystallized Metroidvania as a genre. I really wish we could have a better name, but we don't. So,
I mean, they started it, and you could try to coin a different phrase for it now, but everybody would just call it Metroidvania.
yeah.
So
Sort of
I
like
never
Souls
played.
like. Like I wish we had a different word other than Souls like, but we don't.
I never played Symphony of the Night, and I wish that I had. I just
It's
didn't have a
so
PlayStation
good.
for a long time.
I played the
But
I didn't either. I didn't play it then. I played it the re-release on the Xbox 360 arcade, and it was it's so good.
but Metroidvania's appeal to me because, as you may have gathered from my comment about Sonic, I am very much, and Carrie is this way too, very much a fill in the map kind of thing. Like there's
Yup.
almost this aesthetic pleasure that I get from being like, I've looked everywhere, and it actually can get a little frustrating when I've looked everywhere and I still don't know how to proceed. I'm like, and at certain points, especially in the day and age we live in, I might be like, hey, Carrie, we need to look this up. Because, we live in the age of the internet now. So at least we have that option. Back in the day, you were kind of out of luck.
You had to
I,
have a friends group who knew somebody who had played it or had played themselves and had figured stuff out.
I
Or
remember.
at the grocery store, find a magazine that said Metroid Maps. Oh, dude,
I
Ma.
had a
That was also the day when Nintendo Power and all those were the
Nintendo
rage.
Power.
Yup.
Yeah.
I had a subscription to Nintendo Power since like issue 5 or something. But no, I remember there was one point after I played Final Fantasy 6, Final Fantasy 3 in the US so many times, and there were like 2 or 3 unanswered questions that I did not know, and I begged my mom, and she finally let me call the Nintendo hotline. And basically, what they said was, "Yeah, no, you've done everything." Because it was like, how do I bring General Leo back? And they're like, you can't. And I'm like, okay, I get these dreams when I sleep with Shadow. Sounds, mm. But
Man.
and they're like, okay, and I described them like, all right, you've seen them all, and I'm like, so I've done everything, and they're like, yeah, and I'm like, oh, okay, and this is costing like $5 a minute or something. Like, well, I've got you on the phone. Would you like to, try the Virtual Boy? I'm like, no, I would not. So but you guys out there, we're living in a golden age where if you're stuck in room 2C on this floor, you can find the answers to that without a hotline. So, but I do enjoy for most Metroidvanias when they are appropriately paced, uh, the thrill of exploration and feeling like I figured this out. I get a new item and I'm like, wait a click. I remember from like 2 hours ago, Gameway, there was this door I couldn't open. I can open that now, and it's
Yup.
like, yes,
Yeah. And like Hollow Knight has different colored markers that you can buy from the map supply store that you can place on the map. So I've started using the
Hmm.
different colored markers to mean, okay, like I had at one point places where the floor would jiggle when I'd walk over it. I would put a gold marker there for when I got
Huh.
whatever the downward slam was going to be that would let me break through the floor. And I was, why gold? Well, because gold digger, gold.
yeah,
It's a floor, so I know it's going down. And then, like, I'm using black markers for what we call the emo wall because I still don't have whatever it is that lets me get through those. It's like a wall of pulsing, like, black energy. So Scott coined the name. He was in the chat one night, called it the emo wall, and it's stuck. And I was putting up markers. Okay, I need a double jump to get there. So when I find the double jump, I'll know to come back here. And when I got the double jump, I opened up my map and was like, all right, where were those?
that's neat. I like that that lets you do that. Back in the
Yeah, it's
day,
really
we just
cool.
had to like remember.
And that was one of the like I streamed Super Metroid a few years ago when I got the SNES Classic, and
Yeah,
I did not have a good time. I mean, I had a good time for the vast majority of it, but towards the end of the game, when I'm like, okay, I see the part of the map that I haven't finished out that I need to get to, and I then spent like an hour and a half or more walking around the map because the map system in Super Metroid is very rudimentary.
it
And
is.
I spent like an hour and a half walking around to different points of the map because there's no fast travel in Super Metroid. You got to get there manually. And
Yep.
I could not, for the life of me, figure out where I need to go because I'd get to a part of the map that looked like it
Hmm.
connected and it was a dead end. And I'm like, mother. So then I'd spend 20 minutes getting to the other end and I'd get there and it's a dead end. And I'm like,
And then, like, you find out you have to go through a tunnel in some unconnected room or something. Is that how it turned
yeah.
out?
I think at one point I got so frustrated that I looked it up and I was like, how did I ever figure this out when I was a kid?
Magazines.
Probably, actually. Either that or I had unlimited free time when I was a kid and it didn't matter if I spent an hour and a half dicking around getting lost. Whereas
Yeah.
when I'm streaming, an hour and a half dicking around being lost is super frustrating.
That's true. The situation you're playing it under is very different.
Oh, yeah. So, like, I was really down on Super Metroid for a while after that. I'm like, man, this was one of the, like, 3 reasons I got into streaming. I wanted to play the original Legend of Zelda and share my love for that game with people, and that went really well.
Hmm.
Even though I got lost in the second quest trying to find, I think it was level 5. It turns out that's in the Lost Hills. Don't forget the Lost Hills. Uh, 5? I think it was 5. And I wanted to play Super Mario 64 and share my love of that game with the audience. And then Super Metroid, because it was a game I remember desperately loving. And it was so frustrating that it like blew out all of my love for the game. I've since softened on it and realized that was more about me than it was the game. And I've gotten used to better map systems and whatnot in the meantime. But like, that's one of the potential downsides for Metroidvania games is you don't know where to go next. You're lost.
That is very true.
There are also incentives sometimes for you to replay the game after you did it to try and get faster, because you had like Super Metroid had the special endings. The faster you got with the game.
Yeah, so did the original one.
Yep.
Where the faster you finish, the less clothing Samus was wearing during the very end. Which,
Yep.
I noticed that.
like, from
I know.
today's standpoint, that's kind of skeezy, but we were kids and didn't think
Yeah.
about that. It's like, what do you mean
I
Samus is a girl? What? It says in the manual that he's a he.
yeah, it actually was misleading. I remember in the one for the Game Boy, Metroid 2, like little prepubescent me was like, "Wow, this is getting a little racy. Let me see if I can finish this faster." So it was kind of an interesting, not terribly progressive, but interesting
I
nonetheless.
mean, the
Man,
fact
I
that
couldn't
Samus
finish that game
was
with the guide.
nice. The fact that Samus was a woman actually was pretty progressive for the time. So
Oh, that was definitely, but I
yeah,
mean like the ending thing.
the ending thing
Like,
was not. Yeah, I
good
think they've
job,
since stopped
you know.
that in later games,
I kind of hope that they had.
right?
Yeah.
By the way, Metroid 2 is one of those games I'm going to end up playing 3 times in the future.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I'm going to play Metroid 2 when I get around to playing through the Metroid games. I'm going to play Metroid 2, and on the Game Boy, I'm going to see if I can get the Super Game Boy emulation working so I can play it in color. But I'm going to play Metroid 2. Then down the line, I'm going to play AM2R, which was a fan game called Another Metroid 2 Remake.
Yep.
And then I'm going to play the official Nintendo remake of Metroid 2.
Yeah, the whatever they called it.
Like, I think the first one was called Metroid 2 Return of Samus, which means the remake was called Metroid 2 Samus Returns. Which is weird. But yeah, like, I love the exploration of a Metroidvania, especially if it's got good, like, movement. Like, once you got good with the grappling beam and the speed booster and whatnot in Super Metroid, movement in that game was, and the space jump, which even though the space jump was kind of ass, if you could get it going, it was so good.
Yeah.
And
So,
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was just gonna say I was not the best at video games. I thought I was pretty great, but I was never like amazing. So I kind of relied on a crutch like the space jump. That just as soon as I got that, skill just went out the window. I was just like space jump all the time, everywhere,
Yep.
forever. Let's go. Yeah,
Mhm.
it didn't matter that I couldn't pull off the actually really hard stuff with the speed boost and all that. I have really struggled with that. But once you got the space jump, wasn't necessary anymore.
Yeah.
So,
But
In Metroid Prime on the GameCube, you were talking about movement stuff and how good it felt. That was the first game I thought of. Like when I got really smooth with switching back and forth between different movement stuff, like using the speedball and using the grappling hook and using this, that, and the other thing.
yeah.
You could just zoom all across the world in not very long.
Yeah. Arkham City, I think, is my favorite for once you unlock all of your movement abilities. Moving around the city is just a thing of beauty. Like, I love it.
Yeah, I sat and watched you play that. It looks awesome.
Like, there was some sort of, I think it was one of the Zaz challenges where you answer the phone and he gives you a place in the city you have to get to within a time limit. And because I had unlocked, the grapnel boost at that point, I got there with like 10 seconds to spare and just sort of stood there looking at the phone ringing like, like but a Metroidvania game with good movement abilities is so great. Like in Hollow Knight, like now that I have the double jump and the I don't remember what it's called, the charge up dash thing that moves you horizontally until you hit a wall. Like it's so good to move around the world now to where even if somewhere I'm like, I put a marker down, I'm like, all right, that's not near any of the fast travel points, damn it. And I say damn it only because I'm, crotchety and old, but actually getting there is usually glorious. But then there's that, I don't know where to go next. I don't know what to do now. You're staring at the map. It happened a couple times earlier in Hollow Knight where I'm just staring at the map going, and I spent a good chunk of a stream, one of the early streams, just going to places and seeing why I couldn't go there. I'm like, okay, why didn't I follow the map this way? Oh, it's an emo wall. Why didn't I follow the map this way? There's not a door. Oh, okay. Why didn't I follow the map this way? I have no idea how I'd get there. But it's not, super frustrating. And that's literally only happened to me that once.
Mm-hmm.
Because I started using the map markers and paying more attention. So I'm pretty sure that was all on me. But yeah. So should we move on? Let's do something else.
Sure.
Let's get out of characters moving around. Hey Dirk,
Hmm.
let's do something completely different. One of your favorite game genres, or at least game series, that I have never touched is Civilization.
Yep.
And is Civilization a 4X game? Is that the
Essentially, yes.
okay? And 4X is hang on,
Yeah, what does that mean?
I forget.
I don't
Let
think
me-
I've heard the term before.
It's
Explore,
explore.
expand, exploit, exterminate,
Yep.
Huh.
which is a subgenre of strategy games.
Yeah. So essentially, you pick a civilization, and there's a list of civilizations. There's always DLC where they just add more and blah blah blah. But in essence, you pick a civilization. You pick something that has pros and cons to it. Usually, you pick the one that best fits your personality or the things that you intend to exploit in that game. So in the civilizations, the current iteration, there's different. Oh, and that's another thing is there's different routes to victory. So it's not you have to conquer to win. You can, or you can win with a scientific victory, which means usually going to another planet or another solar system. Blah blah. Um, there is the uh, again in Civ 6 there's the religious victory where you have converted all other civilizations to your religion, and the other one is the culture victory where you essentially are so amazingly awesome in your art and all the things that give you a cultural relevance that everyone's just like, yeah, you win. They did add a new one with one of the expansions, which is the diplomatic victory, where if you earn enough diplomat points, where the World Congress gets together and they say, "Hey, what should we do, guys?" and everyone votes. And if you pick the winning vote enough times, the target number is 20. If you pick the winning vote 20 times, then you get a diplomatic victory, and everyone essentially is like, "Yep, we can't beat you. You're just the awesome sauce, and we just bow down to your awesomeness." So there's different routes to victory to win the game.
Yeah, I was
But-
gonna say. So what Dirk is saying is the 4X games don't have necessarily have a single win
Yes.
condition.
There is no boss at the end that you beat that wins you the game.
Unless
They
it's
also
Gandhi.
do what?
Unless it's Gandhi.
Unless it's nuclear Gandhi. Yeah.
Yeah, Nuclear Gandhi wins
I-
definitely by wiping everybody else out.
I have never played for 2 minutes a Civilization game, but somehow I kept hearing about like Gandhi blowing everybody up in nuclear holocaust. I'm like, yeah, okay. So
Yeah. It turns out that at least from the videos and podcasts that I've listened to about this, that's a myth.
No,
okay.
And then Dirk just says
Dirk's like,
no.
no,
No.
there's enough video.
Oh.
It's the method. People said that it was this one method. There was something in the aggression meter. It was set from 1 to 10 or something, like 1 to something, and Gandhi was always set to the lowest. Well, when you picks a certain government type, it always defaults to 1 less. Well, if he's at the lowest, it defaults all the way back to the other end, which puts him at
it cycles
I will blow you
around.
up. Right.
Yeah, so he
That was
becomes.
supposedly the thing that did it. I don't know if that's true or not, but no, he does. There's enough videos of him being like, but it's only if I think he chooses democracy
Okay,
is
sorry.
what does it.
So
What I meant to say
democracy
was
plus Gandhi
the
is bad.
rumored reason that Dirk just gave
Yeah.
is apparently a myth.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if that's what I've heard was the reason why and everything. I don't know if that's
Mhm.
true or not.
Yeah. Apparently not, judging, like I said, from research other people have done, but it could be that they missed something too, or that I'm misremembering.
But yeah. But when you're aside from the victory condition, everything, you start off with a settler. You settle a location,
Okay,
and
don't
then
don't go
you
into
explore
don't
the
start
map.
going into
Correct.
specifics on civilization itself. Like,
Well, I mean, but that's all of them. Is that you start off at one spot on the map, and you go and explore the area around you, and based on that, your whole point is to build cities, settle planets, or whatever the specific game is,
yep,
to expand your area of control
yeah,
and gather more resources so you can do awesome things.
and eventually hit whatever,
Whatever your target way method of victory is.
yeah, whatever your win condition that you're aiming for is. What is the one? There's a more recent one that has come out that I see people talk about a lot. It's based in space, but because I don't know 4X games, like it doesn't stick. Oh, here we go. Here's a release list. Do, do, do. So we have games like Age of Wonders. I'm just looking at ones that I recognize here. Endless Space,
Mhm.
Galactic Civilization.
Galactic Civilization, Master of Orion, Hegemony.
Stellaris.
That's the one, Stellaris. Is that a 4X game? I'll be damned. Okay.
Oh yeah.
But that's the one that I hear about the most in recent
so
times.
On mine, I threw No Man's Sky under that.
Oh, No Man's Sky.
I consider it to be
not...
somewhat. It's first person, but you have a base and you essentially go out and explore and you gain new stuff. So it falls kind of under 4X, but as a single player.
But you're not really like.
Do you go out and conquer stuff, or do you just explore?
You go out and you explore the world. You set up bases and you collect resources.
Yeah.
The only
Are
thing
you
that
ever
doesn't
in
happen
competition?
Yeah, but there's no competition there. Yeah, Scuzzo just said
Yeah.
No Man's Sky seems more like a survival game with expansion.
Yeah.
Well, I'm adding this with expansionist tendencies.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, this is where we say genre doesn't really mean anything, really. We're not saying Dirk is wrong. We're just saying that we don't see it that way. Although in this case, I think Dirk might be wrong. But the Command and Conquer games are definitely real-time strategy.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think any of us other than Dirk have played any 4X games. Like Mike, have you?
Age of Empires falls under 4X too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I played Warcraft when I was younger, and I played some Age of Empires, and I tried playing. I think I just had a demo of Command and Conquer. Never mind. I didn't actually
Warcraft
have the
is
game.
another real-time strategy. That's different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wait,
I've definitely
I
done
completely
real-time
sorry.
strategy.
I missed the question. I got confused by what was going on.
Oh, look at you trying to read chat and do the show at the same time. Next thing you know, you'll be trying to walk and chew bubblegum.
No, I don't think I did 4X. Like, I think there were a few times, like when I went over to Gabe's house and we played Master of Orion or something like that. But I don't think I had any.
I mean, that counts.
Does Risk count? Is that a 4X?
That's more just
not exactly.
like 2X. Since you can't really like choose an alternate method.
Yeah.
You...
Well, and looking
Although
at chat, there is there was something that was mentioned that is kind of interesting, is that another aspect of 4X games is the paper rock scissors that comes with it. So, like in Civilization, you have your standard melee unit, but the melee unit can be run over by horses. But there's another melee unit who has pikes, who's not the original one, he's just an offshoot, who counters that, but is weaker to arrows. And the regular ground unit is strong against arrows, against archers, and blah, 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 where there's a paper, rock, scissors aspect to the game.
Yeah. And that's the thing that their real-time strategy games focused on a lot. So let's move into those. Like 4X games, just to go back to the pros and cons, like 4X games I've personally never gotten into, mainly because I don't have that kind of time. Like, I've heard horror stories about Civilization. I'll just do one more turn, and then,
Oh yeah.
it's tomorrow morning. Oh crap, I've got to go to work. Like,
Yep.
and I don't want to do that. But that, and like,
Well,
I tend to prefer games where I'm directly controlling a character rather than strategical type games like that. So like those, I own, oh crap, Tropico? No, Tropico's more of a city builder, isn't it? Never mind.
well, what Dewey's describing as being a flaw from his side would actually be a pro in essence, because if, like a platformer, if you're like, oh, I'm getting stuck and frustrated, you can just be like, all right, I'm done. Save, I'm done. I'm gonna walk away, and you have a reason to stop. People who play 4X games, they are a game that even though you beat it once, you're like, you know what, I'm just going to pop in and do a quick game. It keeps you engaged. These are very rarely games where you're like, I'm only going to play Civilization one time and I'll never play it again. I mean, this is the game that I have the most, like my Steam hours. Civ 6 currently has 723 hours. That is over twice the time to the second game on my list. And the bulk of that is not me being like, oh, I have to go run errands. That is me legitimately sitting in front of the screen playing the game.
That's impressive.
So, yeah, I mean, that's, again, the whole just one more turn. It's true.
Yeah.
I have burnt a whole entire hour being like, oh, just one more turn, and then, oh, just one more, and then going, oh, crap, I have to save and leave now. Sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that means that the replayability of the game is really high.
Yeah. And for me personally, I am more interested in anyone that's watched the update video about my future streaming plans actually will know this. I'm more interested at the moment in playing more games. Like, I'm even going to back off of roguelikes, which I love because I want to play more different games rather than play the same game forever. But that's more of a taste thing than, a strike against the genre. That's just why I don't play them. And that's why Dirk does. So how about that? So real-time strategy games popped up in the chat. And I've played one real-time strategy game back in the day. And then again for YouTube. And it's Halo Wars. And I freaking love that game because it's a real-time strategy game that was designed for consoles. So like it was designed with a controller in mind. So it's easily playable with a controller, which is my preferred style of gaming. And it's also the only Halo game I've ever played all the way through, now that I think about it. And it's really good if you're not a real-time strategy fan. Apparently, if you are, it sucks. But I'm not.
It's not as easy to use as the other games in the genre.
Well, it's dumbed down for console players and controllers. Like, the complaint I kept hearing is, oh, you can only build your base on this base area. That's stupid. And I was like, Is it? That sounds convenient. If I had freedom to build my base anywhere, that sounds awful. And people are like, that's how literally every other real time strategy game is. I'm like, no wonder I don't play these damn games. Like,
Well, and there are plenty of games that fall. I'm a big person in the Total War series, which I would consider to be real time strategy because you're in charge of a map, sort of like Risk, but you get to decide what goes on your region, and that allows you to build units that build your army and let you go and conquer the rest of the map. Um, you've got the
oh.
StarCraft and
Yeah, Warcraft and
Warcraft,
StarCraft are by far the most
and then
famous. And Command and
Dune.
Conquer. And
Yeah.
Dune, yeah.
So, but I like the Total Wars limits you so you're not doing it just any old place. You have to do it within a territory, but it gives you a goal of, well, I need to conquer all of these territories. So you send armies in to conquer those territories and everything. It kind of, and you can do battle view where you actually control the battle and all that. But it's kind of in that realm again of you build up your base, you branch out to conquer surrounding areas and all that, just like you would in Warcraft, where you build your base. Okay, I want to build resources closer to the front, and so you rebuild a base closer to the front, and so on.
Yeah. So real time strategy games in general involve uh, strategy that takes place in real time instead of turn based. According to Wikipedia here, uh, Total War is a combination of turn based strategy and real time tactical. So like the fights are real time, and then everything else is turn based. It sounds like, which is that sounds a lot better than actual full on real time strategy to me. But
Yeah. Like it's a weird combination of it, but it still involves parts of it. You still have to strategize. Do I put resources into this?
oh, there it
Because
is.
even in those, there you like in the most recent. Well, I would say recent. It's old at this point. It's Shogun 2.
Yeah.
Um, you want to build things up, you want to build up your resources, but there comes a point where if you continue to keep building things bigger and bigger and bigger, you get dissidents from the population. So they're more likely to rebel if you keep going big. Which means you now have to dedicate resources either to make sure that if they do rebel, you can put them down, which means you have to field troops that you can't send to the front anymore. Or you can just be like, all right, I will only build to this point so that I know they won't rebel on me, which limits how big your unit, like how far you develop your uh, region. You can't develop it completely because you have to worry about that. So it's one of those where you can go this way, but there are consequences for your actions.
Yeah. And like RTS games in general involve resource management and producing some manner of units to explore and others for defense and others for attack. And most of the good ones anyway use that rock paper scissors thing that Dirk was talking about earlier, where certain types of units are better against others. So it encourages you to scout your opponent to see what they're doing and then build stuff to counter them. But then they're probably scouting you, so you need to diversify. And it's just a large mess if you don't know what you're doing. And I don't. So I did have, like, after I did Halo Wars, I did have designs to play through the story mode of the StarCraft games. But then the whole Blizzard thing happened where they were outed as terrible, and I sort of put that on the back burner. And then I got the new computer parts, so I haven't even installed BattleNet on this hard drive. One of these days I'll get around to that because Blizzard Mike was good enough to send me codes for like all of the StarCraft games. And I was like, oh, like one at a time. He's like, oh, hey, do you have StarCraft? No. Do you want StarCraft? Sure. Here's StarCraft. And then later he was like, oh, hey, did you ever get the DLC for StarCraft? No. Here's one. Oh, thanks. So like, because he works there, so he just has codes. And it was on the list, and it will be again eventually, I'm sure, because they're quality games.
I very recently went through StarCraft 2 and did all the stories all over because I just got into a mood of I haven't played that in a while. I'm feeling StarCraft, so I
Yeah.
went through 2 and thoroughly enjoyed it.
Like, the downsides of the real time strategy games for me are, again, it's not direct control of a character, which is where my skills are, but also it's you have to do so much. And playing against another person, like I don't play very many games online against people, because people that play games online against other people tend to get really good at games.
Oh.
And like I have zero interest in ever playing StarCraft against another person, because I'll just die. And there will be no learning experience. I'll just be dead, and I'll be like, well, that was a waste of time. It's why I don't play fighting games online either. Like even Smash Brothers, which I'm pretty good at, unless I find someone who actually plays the game to get good. Like I play the game to have fun, not to get good. So when I play against someone who plays the game to get good, they just crush me, and I'm like, well, that was a waste of time. Glad I did that. I'm just gonna disconnect from the internet and go live in a hut somewhere for the rest of my existence. So yeah, I have zero interest in that. But playing the story mode of all of these games sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
Which is what I did with Halo Wars. And I still say one of the best like sigh of relief moments in gaming history is in Halo Wars, when you've just helped with the evacuation of a large city on a planet, and the what are the bad guys in Halo called? The Covenant. The Covenant has chased you into a corner, and you set up a base there, and you're trying desperately to hold off, and they keep encroaching on you, and it gets worse and worse and worse until suddenly a team of Spartans arrives. And it is like a gift from the heavens, because Spartans are like hero units in this game. And you have 3 as part of your crew, but like an entire squadron of them shows up. And suddenly it is like you are gods, and you just destroy the Covenant. And when they show up, especially on harder difficulties, it's like, ah, like it is glorious. And so, yeah. When I played through that level on whatever the hardest difficulty was back in the day on the 360, man, when they showed up, it was still hard, but I knew I was gonna make it. It's cool that you can have story going on in this very frantic resource management game, and there's still story able to happen. Like that's fascinating to me, which is why I wanted to play StarCraft.
Well, and I think that was one of the big pluses to the StarCraft game series, was that you in the middle of the game, the middle of your rounds, yeah, things would just happen that that just make you have that catastrophe feeling.
Yep.
Like you were saying, gift from the heavens opens up and everything. Um, and it's not just like, oh well, we're gonna throw you guys a bone so you can try and not die. It's story related, and that makes the story even better and gets you more immersed in it. So I agree with that, and that's one of those genres where that plays in really well. It doesn't do so in like a 4X. It just doesn't do that. You don't get that.
Exactly. So Brian had a work thing come up, so he has disappeared, which is why you haven't heard Brian in a while. Mike, you played Warcraft, you said. You have anything to add on any of this?
Um, I really appreciated the quality of life improvement from 1 to 2, where you didn't have to build roads, because that was horrible at setting up my town to allow for roads properly. I was just awful. You end up with just this unusable block of garbage and
Like
lose.
you would build a thing, and because you built them right next to each other, you couldn't actually get the units couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I was very glad in the second one when they decided, oh, or sorry, StarCraft 2, when it was you build houses for the Terrans, and the houses actually went underground. So that way
Wow.
because that way you could use them as, because that was the strategy back in the first one, was you would build the houses, or the Terran population, the unit number structures,
Uh-huh.
you would build them in a choke point and then put bunkers behind them. So that way they had to eat through your buildings to get to the thing that was shooting at them.
Okay, I think I heard about that. I think I read
And
about that
so
strategy.
eventually they were like, well, since that works so well, we'll just make it so that they just duck into the ground. So that way
Hmm.
people can, if you want to go out that way, you can, and then you can pop them back up as a defensive structure. So that again, the how people use things ended up directing how they built things in later games.
Huh.
And I think that's a cool property of it, as well, as that how people ended up playing the games gave the builders in DLC and expansions ideas of what they could do to make the game better, like again, quality of life issues. I also thought that later on, RTSs allowed for much more dialogue to occur in game, because I don't think in Dune there was a lot of "you're here, you're in the battle, and why are you here? Oh, someone else pops up and is all that." I remember playing StarCraft 3 and there being a ton of dialogue in the middle of your game
Hmm.
Yeah, I
that
remember
helped direct the
seeing.
story.
You mean Warcraft 3? Because there isn't a
Yeah,
StarCraft 3.
Warcraft 3.
Yeah. Uh, I was about to say I remember seeing a
StarCraft
lot
3
of that in
confirmed.
Yes.
Warcraft.
But yeah, StarCraft 3, where they're like, "Oh gosh, the plague and all this." And as you're coming across it, it would trigger those dialogues to make you go, "Oh, well, that means I need to go that way to find out what's going on." And it the dialogue incorporated with the gameplay enticed me as the player to go and do more things, instead of just sitting in my spot being like, "I'm going to build up my base. I don't know about the rest of you fools," sort of thing. And that also allowed them to create maps and gameplay that force you to get out of your comfort zone, because again, normally it's you build a base, you build up your army, you go do
Hmm.
something. Well, what if there's a wall of fire that is slowly creeping across the map, and when that fire touches one of your buildings, it's instantly destroyed? All of a sudden, you building up this like huge fortress is not the way to play the game that round,
Hmm.
and it forces you to have to go and do other things.
That
So
is
the
the thing
way,
I appreciate in all video games is when the game like has levels that make you do other things.
yeah, that forces you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Or they put you on a timer, and if you increase the difficulty, the timer is much lower. Gets lower every time.
Yeah. So let's move to something completely different again. How about one of the biggest genres in video games and always has been are sports games.
Hmm.
And like back in the day on the NES, like the old man and I would play RBI baseball and then RBI baseball 2 and we had golf. And like still one of the games the old man and I have played the most, like so much so that I got freaking sick of it, was Mario Golf Toadstool Tour on the GameCube. Like that is a game that we played the holy hell out of. And like but other than like those few, and most of that is just stuff I played with the old man, I don't really do sports games. And I don't know why. But like
Well,
I picked up whatever year the Madden game was that had Troy Polamalu on the cover because Steelers fan, and I popped it in and went to play and did not understand anything that was going on, and the game was not helping. And the manual was like 3 pages, and I realized that Madden games these days are only for people that play Madden games. And that disappointed me because I was like, you know, I'd gotten into football over the last couple years at that point. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to try out Madden. And it just was zero fun. There was no instruction. I didn't know what I was doing. There didn't seem to be a tutorial mode. And which is weird because games nowadays all have tutorial modes. But I've realized that the more of a simulation of a sport a game is, the less I enjoy it. Like my favorite basketball game is NBA Jam. The only hockey game I ever spent any time on was Wayne Gretzky hockey on the Nintendo 64, which is not realistic. And I was wondering how about you? Like I haven't played a baseball game since the NES because they got too complicated for me to be interested in them. So how about you guys?
The only sports game I recall my brother and I, well, no, we borrowed it from someone. We didn't actually own it. Anyway, so I mean, the only one I remember us playing big time was Mario Tennis on the N64.
Ooh, I never played that one.
That was very fun.
I did have the one on the Cube,
Uh-huh.
which was also a lot of fun. Oh, boxing games is the one exception to that. The closer to a simulation it is, because I loved well, I sucked at Punch Out, but I enjoyed Punch Out. I destroyed Super Punch Out, and then when King of the Ring was a thing on like the PS1 era, I played those and enjoyed them. And then when they switched to, I can't remember what the King of the Ring turned into. What was that series called? Does anybody remember? But it was much more simulaty and much less arcadey. And I played the hell out of those too. The one that had the real stick or the real punch control where how you move the stick changed how you punched. Like I dug those games. Sorry, I just realized that was one of my exceptions to the rule. Boxing. What was that called? Hang on.
Well, I was
Fight
thinking
Night.
like
There we go.
your WWE games would fall into that as well.
I don't count those as sports games. Those are like weird ass fighting games.
But did they require special controls and knowledge of the controllers in order to play the game?
I mean, yeah, but most of them were, at least the ones that I got into playing, that was either explained on the screen or in a tutorial somewhere, or the manual actually had information in it back then.
Well, and the thing also was there almost a yearly release of the game?
Yeah, but
Just like your other
I still
sports
don't
games
think
do.
that wrestling games count as sports games in the way that I'm envisioning it. Like, because wrestling isn't a sport. Like, it's a soap opera
Drama.
for testosterone people. But and I watched a lot of wrestling in college, so don't come at me with the hater nonsense. I was all about some wrestling in the early 2000s and like in the Attitude Era.
Yeah, because that's when you used to play all those games.
Exactly, yeah. But no, when I'd say like sports games, I mean like actual, sports. Baseball, hockey, volleyball, soccer. I've never
The
played a
only-
soccer game in my
The only
life.
sports game I ever played was baseball, Major League Baseball on the NES.
Oh yeah, we had Major League Baseball too.
I always played the Chicago Cubs because that was my team back then.
Who made that one? Yeah, this one. That was by Atlas? Oh, it was published by LJN. That's why it sticks out of my head. LJN, who later became infamous for releasing crap. Major League Baseball was pretty good, though. But like NFL Blitz, I enjoyed in arcades. I would actually put money in NFL Blitz to play it. Ice Hockey on the NES is another one that I didn't own, but played the hell out of. With what was his name? Jason York. Don't trust people named Jason, yo. But yeah, golf games. I don't like. I never got into any of the Super Simulator ones, but like I said, we played a lot of Mario Golf. Skateboarding games don't really count because most of those are a different kind of game where you're on a skateboard. So I don't think I've ever played a soccer video game ever. Weirdly enough, I never even played Mario Strikers. So I guess we're the wrong people for sports games, huh? What about racing games?
Yeah.
There we go.
Oh,
There's
yeah,
a
racing
sports game
games.
that we've all played.
Phantom Menace Pod Racing. I played the heck out of that.
See?
Or whatever it was called.
Now that's
There were
pod
two
racing.
games. One was cartoony. One was a little more. I mean, is realistic the right word for a science fiction game?
I know what you mean, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, I think the cartoony one was Super Bombad Racing, wasn't it?
Yeah, you're right. That's what it was.
Yeah. I don't know why. Oh, I remember that because it has the stupidest name ever. But like, yeah, racing games. Like, two of the first three games we had on the NES were racing games. Because the first three games we had on the NES were Karnov, which is a weird ass platformer with like an inventory system. It's a very strange game. And RC Pro Am, which is a top down racing game, and Rad Racer, which is a behind the car racing game. But like Mario Kart, we've all played Mario Kart games. I know Brian has an unhealthy obsession, or at least did for a while, with Mario Kart games. I even played Gran Turismo, the first, I think, three, until I realized I didn't actually know what I was doing, and I wasn't really enjoying it anymore. But that's the game that made me almost kill Lex, but back before we started dating. Because I was playing Gran Turismo 3, and I was doing one of the I don't remember the word for it, but it was like a tournament where you had to do like 3 or 4 different races in a row, and I was halfway through the next to last race, and she walked into the room and said, "What you doing?" And I was like, "Playing." She's like, well, "Stop playing and let's go do stuff." I'm like, "I can't. I've been playing for like 2 hours. I gotta finish this." And she just reached over and pressed the power button. And this was, they didn't save between races. Like, this was PS2. You had to manually save, and you could only do it when you weren't racing. And when I jumped up, said, "What?" She ran back to her room and locked the door, and I did not succeed in kicking the door down, unfortunately. I think she was flirting. But yeah, I realized after that I was only playing them because they were there. I didn't actually enjoy. Like, once it got to the point where tinkering with the gear ratios and whatnot became a requirement, I was like, I'm out. Because you could play the early Gran Turismo games as an arcade style racer if you wanted to. But yeah, like, racing games have been a thing forever. I haven't played one in forever. On the PC, we had a NASCAR game that was a weird mix between arcade and simulation-ish.
Whenever I was growing up in high school, or growing up during high school, there was this Indianapolis one that was all polygons and everything. And my favorite thing to do was to turn the car around and race the other direction.
Polygon. What was it?
Because it
Virtua
would,
Racer?
yeah. And like you were in it, you raced in the driver's seat, but then you can always watch replays.
Yeah.
And my favorite thing to do was to drive the other way to create a massive pileup and then watch the instant replay
Oh, I bet that
to
was
see
fun.
how much of a disaster did I create. And then I would try and play the game the right way, and I could only get maybe like 8 laps in. But if you bumped another player, it would damage your wheels.
Yep.
Well, if you bumped them too hard, it would destroy your wheel, and then you
Yep.
were stuck.
Yeah.
You couldn't go anywhere. You like literally they were racing, and you just sat there watching them race in your broken car. But if your wheels were only damaged, you could kind of roll your way into the pit, get new tires on, and then keep going. But that at that point, that's when I was like, you know what? This is more fun going backwards.
Yeah, racing games have like a lot of different flavors. There's the racing against the time, like Rad Racer and Virtua Racing, and like Daytona USA, that we all would put a dollar in every once in a while to run 3 laps and then lose and be like, that was fun. Not worth $1 though.
Yeah.
And then there's the racing against other cars, whether that involves combat or not, Mario Kart. And oh my god, Wave Race. Oh, Wave Race 64 was one of my favorites. I can't think of any racing games that I've played like recently.
All the racing games I've played recently are shoehorned into other games.
Ooh, like what?
In Kingdom Hearts.
Sorry, reflex.
Yeah, I'm about to say. All I have to say is that it's like, yeah, there's a couple places where you have to rate. Like there's little racing mini games inside of it. There was, I think wasn't it in Final Fantasy VII? You had to go zooming down a mountain on a snowboard.
Yeah, the snowboarding mini game in Final Fantasy VII was a thing.
So ones where it's just sort of shoehorned in. It's not really the main theme of the game. It's just in there.
Yeah.
As a hey, if you really want to complete the game, you need to master this mini game.
Yeah. Or just as a break in the action. Like when Mike brought up Super Mario Land earlier, I almost brought up the shmup levels as a way to keep things fresh in that game.
Oh yeah, those are cool.
Oh, I tell a lie. I played Burnout Paradise on stream a few years ago. Last played March 2018. But I love Burnout Paradise. That is the by far the most recent racing game that I've played. Yeah. Burnout Paradise is great because it's partially a racing game and partially a destroying other cars game. And it doesn't matter which mode you're in, you can still race and destroy other cars because whichever one is the point. Like there's some races where the object is to win and there's some races where the object is to destroy a lot of people. But either way, you're still doing both at all times. And it's an open world racing game, which is so weird. But wonderfully well done. Like, yeah. Man, we didn't even get to like half of the genres I thought we talk about because we spent too much time on each one. And that was with Brian being missing for a large chunk. That's amazing.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think we're going to have to wrap it up here because I got to head to bed.
Yeah, I was just noticing how late it was. So I guess we'll do a part 2 at some point.
Yeah.
And do the other stuff like RPGs and whatever else we've missed. That's the main thing that comes to mind is RPGs.
Well, there's action games.
Oh yeah, fighting games, shooting games, tower defense games, walking simulators, building games like SimCity. So yeah, we'll get into that, I guess, in the future. So you guys wanna? I let Brian know that we're gonna wrap up. In
Okay.
case you have a sec to jump back in and final thought. So yeah, you guys want to go ahead and final thoughts?
Well, for my final thought, it's fun having the discussion about this, and yeah, like I said, there's lots of uh, lots of genres that I've thoroughly enjoyed, and I remember watching some of these guys play in college and being like, oh yeah, I really want to play that, and then there were some where it was no, that I have absolutely no interest in that at all. Like the Metal Gear series, Metal Gear Solid series was great to watch somebody else play. I had no interest in playing it, like at all.
Understandable.
So, but
Yep.
yes, lots of fun.
Dementor said JRPGs will take up an hour if you let Brian ramble. I think JRPGs would take up an hour regardless of whether Brian's there or not, because
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure all of us have played at least some
Yeah, at least something.
and
if not
have a lot to
enough
say.
to take up that hour block, just being like, how about this one? How about this one?
Yeah,
How about this
exactly.
one? Especially since the mechanisms of that tend to be shoehorned into a lot of games.
Exactly. Yeah. So, how about you, Mike?
Um, when I think back, even though the consoles and stuff I had access to were a lot more limited than a lot of people I knew, I did play a pretty wide variety of games on what I had. You know, the Game Boy for the longest time, then eventually an N64, then eventually a GameCube. You know, and I had enough friends with and the computer, of course, and I had enough friends with other stuff that I could go hang out and play whatever. I remember in college so many times just sitting and turning on Grand Theft Auto in the room, which I'm pretty sure we were borrowing from Austin or somebody. It didn't belong to either me or Gabe, and just sitting. I had no idea what part of the story they were on in their file or anything that was going on. Just find a car, steal it, drive around, listen to the radio, bump into too many things, get out of the car before it explodes, steal another car, drive around. Just
Or the goal was to steal the tank and blow everything up.
oh yes, that was always fun. Finding a tank or finding a plane and flying it somewhere where you shouldn't, and getting too close to the ground and really feeling the console start to chug to render everything you're zooming past at way too high speeds. That was always fun.
Yeah, it
I was on
was.
a really fast motorcycle one time, and I thought I had ramped off of a ledge, but then a split second later, the bridge that I was on finally rendered underneath me, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh man, the technical limitations on those games had some serious funny nonsense going on.
Yeah.
We'll get into those too whenever we do part two. I don't want to say next time in case we don't do it on the next episode, but next time we talk about this.
Yeah, I look forward to that. Talk about more stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm gonna have to leave, so you guys all have a wonderful night.
You too,
Alright,
Zerk.
thanks.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Well, how about you there, Beardy Man? Dirk
Oh, I
had
thought
to.
that was me.
Oh, was that you? Oh, that was you. Yeah, Dirk. I didn't expect Dirk to stay for past his. So when he's
Oh.
like, "I gotta go," okay, Dirk's done. No, that was you. Yeah, my bad. So yeah, unfortunately, Brian had a work thing pop up. A client has contacted him, and he's got to be a lawyer. So sorry, we lost Brian for the end of this. But I think Dirk talked enough to cover Brian, believe it or not. So I guess I will. I guess I'll rattle off the patrons before I give my final thought. Ha ha ha. So you can go to patreon.com, ow my elbow, patreon.com/themanapool, become a lifeguard. Being a patron at any level will get you early access to the deep end videos, which I need lots of people to be able to watch those and let me know, hey, stupid, this is wrong, or hey, stupid, this is offensive. And I'll be like, I didn't realize, I'm sorry. Like, the lifeguards are going to be my beta testers on those videos. So I appreciate all of you I can get. And you can also get the odds and ends and the sponsorship shout out. Hey, like this. So let me thank our mythic lifeguards. Al, Kim Ho, Scuzzo, John Parker, Jake Jansons, Beardy Man, Timu Hellas Haru, Scroll, PJ McMullen, Violet Moon, The Beast Father, Aaron Goodwine, Jason Kaus, Andrew Hunt, Cody Buckowing, Al, Casey, Pinball Witch, Jason Doan, Mr. Dr. Lewis, Connor Kennedy, and ALK Alters. Yay. But yeah, like I said at the beginning, like the whole idea of video game genres fascinates me. Like when I got the big pile of emulation of old games and whatnot, and I was like, all right, let's get some of these sorted by genre, and I found that it was virtually impossible. Because like something that we didn't even bring up is even the term adventure game means two completely different things depending on if you were thinking in terms of consoles or if you're thinking in terms of PCs. Like, I grew up a console player, so like Legend of Zelda is an adventure game. But for people who grew up on a PC, an adventure game means a point and click adventure game, which I'm, being a console gamer, add the words point and click to, you know, like King's Quest and stuff like that. That's what
Monkey
they,
Island and whatever.
yeah, Monkey Island. That's what people think of when those people say adventure game. And I'm like, no. I don't even know why those are called adventure games, because they're puzzle games. Like in Legend of Zelda, you're going on an adventure. That's an adventure game. But again, that's my console bias. So
Maniac Mansion was on consoles. It was on the NES.
well, yeah, but there it wasn't called an adventure. Well, it might have been at the time. I don't know. But again, like on the NES, adventure game meant a completely different thing.
Yeah.
And it was, that sort of thing fascinates me. And I ran a poll way back when I was trying to figure this out, and I found that, yeah, if you grew up on PC games, you thought of point and click, and if you didn't, you thought of Zelda-style games. And that fascinates me. But even so, like I told the dorks before the show, like when Dragon Warrior and Final Fantasy hit and everyone was really high on RPG games, suddenly games that didn't have RPG elements or genres that didn't have anything to do with RPG started having RPG elements. Like, you remember Zelda 2? You remember leveling up in Zelda 2? Have you leveled up in any Zelda game since then? No! And that's because the RPG elements started to get shoehorned in. And another of my favorite examples is the difference between Fallout 3 and Borderlands. Like, Fallout 3 is an RPG with first-person shooter elements. And Borderlands is a first-person shooter with RPG elements. And if you've played those games or know about those games, that distinction makes perfect sense to you. And if you haven't, you'll be like, I don't... What? And things like roguelike. Like, first-person games can be anything. I don't remember if I said this before the show or at the beginning of the show, but like, you can have first-person action games, first-person shooters, first-person puzzle games, first-person adventure games, walking simulators, you know. And so that's more of a mechanical thing than a genre. Sort of like roguelike, you know. I've played roguelike games that are puzzle games. I've played roguelike games that are Metroidvanias. I've played roguelike games that are dungeon crawlers. I've played roguelike games that are straight up platformers. Like, there's roguelike is not a genre. It's a mechanic.
Yes.
And yet people still say things like, you know, the roguelike genre. And I'm like, no! It's a modifier. like the
Some of that's
rants,
just like a disagreement about what the
what the word genre means.
word genre means.
Yeah. Like, I am of the opinion that superhero, for movies, superhero is not a genre. Superhero is just a
No.
modifier.
Yeah.
But you say
So
that to people that don't agree with you and they think you're an idiot. Which, you know, I am, so that's cool. But not about this, damn it. So, yeah. That's just that's one of the reasons that I asked that question on the Chewy Asks. Which, hey, join the Discord or follow me on Twitter, because I do that periodically whenever I think of a question that I think people might want to answer. I'll go ask it and use the hashtag Chewy Asks. And it's put it in the Chewy Asks channel in the Discord. Ow. But, yeah, I'm always fascinated by these things. So we'll be doing this again. I can't wait till we get to, like, the difference in RPGs and JRPGs and Western RPGs and whatnot. I don't even know if any of you have any opinions on that, but I sure don't. I think that's more about the origin of the game than it is about the game itself. Like, I think
Yeah,
an
I mean, there are
RPG
certain...
that comes from Japan is a JRPG no matter what kind of game it is.
Yeah, but there are certain design choices where you feel like you can definitely tell.
Maybe. And that's a conversation we'll have later.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, with that, we'll be done. I hope you enjoyed our rambling scattershot tour through some of the video game genres. And we'll be back at some point with a part 2 where we will cover a bunch more. And probably a part 3, given how we did today. Because I'm sure we'll miss a bunch next time. So be sure you let us know your favorite games in the genres we talked about, or why you do or don't like the genres we talked about, or drop some genres that you don't want us to miss next time, or better yet, just show up for the live stream next time, because it's gonna be better if you're here to shout them at us in the chat, and we'll be like, oh, we should talk about this next. Yeah. But this has been the Mana Pool number 659. Thank you all so very much for joining us, and go play some video games.